on tonight's study session. The date is April 10th, 2020, and it's 6:06 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 9:06 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Just in case you miss it, the different segments will be spliced up as always into 3 different segments. As we'll talk about today, there's 3 different components of our study sessions these evenings. One is a much more dialectical and theoretical engagement with African internationalism as a subject. The second is historical entry into the Burning Spear newspaper. And the third is contemporary entry into the Burning Spear newspaper. We'll talk about that. So let's get into today's class. All right, who are everybody? This is the today's Burning Spear study group. My name is Matsemela Odom. I'm a member of imperialism in the African People's Socialist Party. I am also the chair of the Africans Charged Genocide Campaign. If you want to know more about the Africans Charged Genocide Campaign, go to africanschargedgenocide.org. So go to africanschargedgenocide.org. I would like to begin by saluting the leadership, my leadership in the movement. First and foremost, Chairman Marley Will of the APSP USA, as well as the African Socialist International, President Colombia Will Win of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. Especially at this time, I'd also like to salute Secretary General Louise Kinshasa of the African Socialist International, and Dr. Aisha Fields of the All African Peoples Development and Empowerment Project, as well as Project Black Ankh, which we'll be talking about today. Clearly, everyone understands the conditions of the COVID-19 crisis, but some of you all might not be aware of the people's war against COVID-19 being waged by the Uhuru movement internationally, from San Diego to Soweto, all the way up to London. So let's go on and get started. If you really like what you see here today, I'd like to invite you all to if you really like what you learn about today, I'd like to invite you all to go to the Burning Spear TV YouTube channel on Sundays from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and participate in the Omali Taught Me a Sunday political education study led by the Chairman Omali Yeshatela. The overall purpose of the study groups is for us to introduce you all to the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, the African People's Socialist Party, as well as the Burning Spear. For over 50 years, the Burning Spear has been the voice of the International African Revolution, and it's the only Black Power newspaper to survive the onslaught of counterinsurgency waged against the Black Power movement by the United States government. Its legacy goes all the way back to 1962. It goes all the way back 52 years to 1968. So I'm really happy to engage you all in that legacy. The other thing is to sort of have you understand African internationalism. So for the people who do have the agenda, you can you can click on the link here and learn more about African internationalism. African internationalism is the theory of the African working class. It's guided by dialectical materialism. It understands that the world and the African place in the world is knowable through social scientific research and the application of that research. It is not, say, what other people might call spookism or idealism or anything like that. Importantly, as we always underscore, African internationalism is not Pan-Africanism, right? What we just laid out underscores the difference between such. So that guides our overall trajectory, as I already noted, of these courses. So that guides our trajectory of the of these readings. Strengthening our understanding of African internationalism, and other political theories and entries from the Uhuru movement. We engaged the historic readings of the Burning Spear. The historical entries of the Burning Spear can be found at the University of Florida digital collections. So if you Google University of Florida digital collections Burning Spear, it will take you to the historical entries of the Burning Spear, going all the way back to 1969. So, and then we bring you to contemporary readings, generally with overall themes. Today's theme is going to be the theme of internationalism, international solidarity. So in that study, we'll move from Central America all the way to South Africa. So first off, I'd like to just welcome everybody here on the call today. From Los Angeles, we got Marquise. From St. Louis, we got Kumba. Right. From Ohio, we got Maito. We got Kevin in San Diego, Tiana and Quante in San Diego, Darius in San Diego. So thanks everybody. Remember, everybody, this is being recorded. So if you don't want, say, your name, your legal name to be shown, you can change your name. If you don't want your picture to be shown, you can mute your picture. But this is being recorded and will be posted on social media. So let's get into this. The way in which we do the readings is we do a round robin reading and then we do a discussion after the reading. So unlike sometimes where you might want to break, interject into the reading, we round robin the reading, and then after that we discuss. So we've allotted about 20 minutes for every reading. This should take us to around 7:30, 7:45 Pacific Standard Time.
Uhuru, comrade. This is Demetrius. I just got on.
All right, Uhuru. Thank you, Demetrius.
Okay.
We got Demetrius in Seattle.
Yeah. Can you see me?
Yes, we can see you.
Is that a still picture or am I moving? I think it's a still picture. I don't know how to change it.
You have to click on an image. Click on the sort of image that looks like a video camera. And it should say like start video. If you want, I can start your video.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, if you don't mind, please. Yep. Okay. Okay. There we go.
All right. Uhuru, Demetrius.
Uhuru, comrade.
Uhuru. All right. So everybody, let's go ahead and open up the first reading. The first reading comes from the report to the Seventh Congress of the African People's Socialist Party held in 2018. The interesting thing is that actually the readings that we'll have today then will span all the way from the first Congress, period of the first Congress, to the second Congress. So all the way from 1981, when the first Congress of the African People's Socialist Party was held, to the present. Like I said, if you get into those readings to the old burning spears, I mean, you really get to see the development of African internationalism as theory and practice, development of the African People's Socialist Party, and importantly, the commitment to struggling to uphold the line of African internationalism. Like I said, through theory and through practice. So let's go on and click on this reading.
Is that, which one is that? Party Legacy?
Yeah, Party's Legacy. Uhuru. Mike, though, man, it's great to see you, brother.
Yeah, what's up, fam?
Hey.
Still breathing, still breathing.
Yeah. Uhuru.
What's up, Tiana?
All right. So
What's up, Darius?
So let's go on and get started. Who'd like to begin the reading?
I'll begin.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Party's legacy of internationalist solidarity. As the Vanguard Party representing our class and nation, we have stood unconditionally with the struggles of colonized people around the world. We've always demonstrated practical unity with the people of occupied Palestine and their righteous struggle to liberate their land and the people from the illegitimate white settler colony of Israel, the factions as a forward military base of U.S. imperialism. Even before the success of Iranian national liberation from U.S. neo-colonialism in 1979, our party had occupied picket lines and hosted. Yeah, I have something in my way. I don't know how to move it. Okay. Picket lines and hosted forums and events designed to expose the fight against the U.S.-backed, I can't see that part, Reza Pahlavi. We encountered violent mass white colonial opposition in the to our organized support of the Iranian people following the siege of the U.S. embassy in Tehran by Iranian militants. July 1979 was also the time of the defeat of the U.S.-supported Somoza regime in Nicaragua by the Sandinista National Liberation Front, FSLN. Without waiting for an invitation, the African People's Socialist Party organized many public political forums in support of the Sandinista-led revolution in Northern California Bay Area. Even before the flight and temporary escape of Somoza from its bunker in Nicaragua's capital, Managua, our party functioned as a part of the U.S. front on the Sandinista movement.
Okay, so let's kick it to somebody else.
Oh, okay.
Tiana, Deandra, Maito.
All right. In the 1970s, the African People's Socialist Party entered into a brief relationship with the Puerto Rican Socialist Party, PSP. We participated with the PRSP in a 1,000-strong mass anti-colonial mobilization in Philadelphia in 1976. Shortly after, the party organized the first World Tribunal on reparations for Black people in the U.S. in Brooklyn, New York. We were in Belfast, Ireland, where we developed unity with the Irish Republic Socialist Party with our struggle for national liberation from U.S. colonialism. The Irish Republican Socialist Party organized a joint press conference with our party to publicly announce its support for our demand for reparations to African people. This allowed our party to denounce British colonial occupation of Northern Ireland and express our support for Irish resistance and the revolutionary liberation of Northern Ireland. In 1985, the party entered into an enduring fraternal relationship, an alliance with Unión de Barrio, a most influential component of the Mexican national liberation movement. Some of these relationships were formed during a time of extreme backward race nationalism within sectors of the African national liberation movement. It was a time when there was a common refrain that the international relations we were establishing were white too. Some insisted that our movement could not establish alliances and relations with others until we get ourselves together, whatever that meant beyond a demand that the African working class remain isolated. We as African internationalists, we have always recognized the importance of uniting with all the people of the world in the fight to overturn parasitic systems of colonial capitalism that has the world in its death grip. We have always been committed to international solidarity. We refuse to accept the isolation demanded by the African petty bourgeoisie. We have always taken the strategic approach that anti-colonial struggle anywhere in the world is a part of our struggle to defeat US imperialism and parasitic capitalism.
Uhuru.
Sorry,
That's the end of that page. Yeah, Uhuru.
Uhuru. So that's the end of that reading. The party's legacy of international solidarity. So let's begin our discussion. We have around 15 minutes, so we got a good amount of time for discussion following this reading. It's this reading that I really sort of appreciate because once again, it really distinguishes African internationalism from the much more specifically like what it says here, quote unquote, race nationalism, especially this question of, and it says at the bottom, this idea that we got to get ourselves together first. I mean, Maito knows. Remember, Maito was out here around the time of the in San Diego of the Muslim ban,
Right.
And the public discussions we were having in San Diego around the time of the Muslim ban, and as African internationalists, us showing solidarity with Muslim people, with people from the Middle East and Africa, as well as the other sort of immigration bans that were being put in place, and we still hear those ideas. You know, oh well, we got to take care of ourselves. We got to take care of ourselves first. But what really stands out to me oftentimes is that idea of taking care of ourselves first is generally sort of followed up with some form of say opportunistic demand, right? You know, support something that they have going on with the monetary value or through which a project which they lead or something like that. And then it also really clearly presents a void in the analysis put forward, the inability to analyze the relationships, the horizontal relationships between colonized people versus the vertical relationship that colonialism has over our lives and things like that. So you know, people say, well, you know, you talk about the Muslim ban, but last night I went into this liquor store across the street and, you know, some Arabs was talking bad to me or something like that. And it's like, but see, African internationalism can explain that. Pan-Africanism outside of, you know, promoting some sort of pride in African cultural heritage does not have baked into the ideology the material ability to correctly explain that relationship. So let's go on and discuss. What's your responses, everybody? I'm gonna start calling on people. Maito, let's go, brother.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's extremely important to understand internationalism. I mean, we saw a perfect example of that with the relationship between Haiti and Venezuela. You know, you had a lot of our folks who, when it came to Venezuela, they expressed that, like you said earlier, that wasn't our fight, that wasn't our struggle. And it's always this kind of bogus argument trying to compare, like, what have they done for us? You know what I mean? What have they ever done? We're always extending our love and support for others, but you hardly ever see them return it back to us. And so, like with the Haiti and Venezuela, you know, it came back to kind of like bite that concept in the butt, because when you have the Petrocaribe situation where Venezuela was helping the whole Caribbean, you know, Africans in the Caribbeans with the oil, and where they couldn't get oil from anywhere else, especially in the European countries. And so now here you are saying that you won't support Venezuela. Venezuela is the one that's helping Africans in the Caribbeans with the oil. And now suddenly, without you understanding that connection, you suddenly see Haiti having a crisis, and seeing our brothers in the street rebelling because of the oil and the lack of oil, and the government, you know, jacking the oil prices up. And a lot of our brothers are in distress, and they're struggling there. But you don't make the connection that when America and the imperialists put them embargoes and sanctions on Venezuela, and then it cuts off that support that they're giving to the Africans there, you see what I'm saying, in the Caribbean, and they just miss it. They miss the connection, the importance of solidarity on an international level as we fight against this imperialist beast. You know what I mean? And so that was and I hope that I was clear there. You know what I mean? It's like Venezuela is helping us in Haiti, but when America attacks Venezuela, it hurts Africans. You know what I mean? And it's an example that we're not in this struggle alone, man, and we're not going to be able to overcome this alone. We got to stand in solidarity with other anti-colonial imperialist forces. You know. Uhuru.
All right, Uhuru, man. I tried to throw a curveball at you, but you hit it out the park. So, ain't no sports going on nowadays anyway, so I had to throw that metaphor.
Yeah.
So who else?
Uhuru. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Who was that? Who was speaking in?
I was just about to speak.
Oh, go for it.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate this article, and yeah, kind of pointing out the kind of gave us a backdrop, a historical context of the party's involvement with the movement and our commitment to African internationalism. I like what my brother just spoke, how he broke down this contradiction between Haiti and Venezuela, and yeah, when European imperialists get involved, it affects all Africans. So you know, any country or any culture that's been oppressed, you know, we there to be in solidarity with them, and because we know what oppression feels like, because we struggle every day for centuries, and white supremacy don't have no boundaries. It just come to take and steal. So yeah, we African internationalism is that's like the mortar that hold the bricks together. This struggle that we all embark on against the oppression of Africans and colonized people around the world. Uhuru.
All right, Uhuru, let's jump to the next person.
Can y'all hear me?
Hey, Uhuru.
Uhuru, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I've been trying to talk this whole time. Okay.
Oh, yeah, we can hear you after that. We can hear you now, though.
No, I just I just really, really want to appreciate this this reading. It really, I think about the concept of third worldist, and and I never knew what that was until I want to say a couple of years ago. And basically, a general small understanding of that is people that believe that the revolutionary process is really gonna take hold in a so-called third world nation, and that's where the real fight is, and that's where the real struggle is. And I thought that was kind of cool, especially compared to like these white socialist or white communist groups, that just place the whole revolution, through their colonial lens, and think that that it's going to be like this mythological white working class that's going to lead the world, out of colonialism and capitalism. And but still, still even that whole concept of third worldist doesn't fully unite the whole world. And I just really appreciate what we just read, because it was talking about Ireland, Puerto Rico, Nicaragua, like all these different places. And the more we understand how our struggles are tied together, the more we're like unapologetic with the work that we do. Because I still know like a lot of Africans in San Diego who have that what is it? We have no friends, that have that whole mentality. And then I'll talk to them about the relationship that we've had with Unión del Barrio. And even after that, they'll still be like, well, that, they'll still find a way around that, after giving them concrete material evidence that we do have relationships with other colonized people. And so I think, I really started understanding more about material interests, that it really does come down to our material interests, and the material interests of the African working class is to overthrow imperialism, overthrow capitalism. But the material interest of the petty bourgeois is to reform capitalism and reform it to make it fit better to, for a certain sector of Africans. And so I just really appreciate this reading on African internationalism to understand that our struggle it's a global struggle. You know what I'm saying? I just appreciate that that stance. Uhuru.
All right, Uhuru. Who else?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I wanted to talk about basically it makes me think of how we have to learn how to be unified. A lot of times we think that unity means being exactly the same. And so if you notice, a lot of times with us, our people, we seem to come at each other that way, even within ourselves. If you don't believe like I do, if you don't dress like I do, if you don't, say what I say, we will we don't associate with you. And so all of this, African internationalism, it's really something that we have to, to me it takes time to learn and really accept completely, because we have to work through our own colonized minds. We have been brought up to think a certain way because of how we experience the world. So we look at other people, like, for example, me coming up in my high school, there would be riots, and there would be riots with Black against Brown. They're always fighting, not uniting. So, and then when you try to get people to unite, it's like, well, it's always talking about the differences that we have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we need all people to fight against imperialism. Same thing with white people. A lot of people think that it's about hating white people, and that's not what, it's about. It's about, bringing truth. We don't apologize for bringing the truth about what's been done with the capitalists and everything, but we're not, teaching about hate takes away from the message. And I was thinking, and when so reading this, I was thinking about Malcolm X. You know, at first, I don't know, you know, if anybody, everybody should be familiar with the movie Malcolm X. You're not. There's a scene where Malcolm X is like, a white person comes up and says, "I love your movement. I love what you're doing. Blah blah. How can I help?" And he's all basically like, "You can't. You know, you dismiss her." But then, you know, he later on when he learned and everything, he said, you know, anybody who's willing to help and be, you know, can come along and help. It didn't matter who you were. So when we think about, you know, the Uhuru movement and reparations and things, we have white people paying reparations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We hate them, no. So I believe that this I appreciate this article because it speaks to all of that. It helps us to overtone any colonization that's, you know, that we're still caught up in.
Right, because moving away from simply discussions of say racism, even to understanding of our conditions as being led through colonialism, what this allows for us to do is to then understand that the conversation is about power, right? Does you, your organization, and your nation commit itself towards white power or towards the overthrow of white power? What we see with the IRSP is that the IRSP committed itself to the overthrow of white power and to the production of black power, to anti-imperialism, but also to the demand of reparations, which therefore sort of says, you know, shows a material stake, right? Because eventually, yeah. So when the struggle really kicks off, we're gonna have to, you know, people, you know, how materially will your organization prove that they are on the side of African liberation? How materially does your nation, does your group show that they're on the side of African liberation? You know, because you let some brothers slam dunk some basketballs or something like that, and the other politics of representation that neoliberalism shows us, or because you've put in processes of wealth redistribution. So what Maitha was talking about was that he was talking about, look, you know, wealth redistribution, talking about the redistribution and the fair distribution of resources throughout Latin America and the Caribbean by Venezuela. And that's how sort of this government of people, whether you see them as African or not, even though Hugo Chavez was African, whether you see them as African or not, right? That's how materially they showed their support for Black power. Whereas, you know, we know on the continent, you got people twice as dark as me, willingly giving the resources of Africans to neo-imperialist powers and stuff like that, right? So that's how we can say people's solidarity is proven through their action and the distribution of the resources. So let's hear, say maybe two more people, a couple more people who haven't spoken, and then we'll move to the next segment. Let's see. What'd you say?
Only thing I wanted to mention was just how risky a position this was to take at that time. You know, it's still very risky, you know, to be open to be in solidarity with Palestine. You know, that's getting people banned from college campuses to this day. You know, so it was a very bold and risky position to take. Like I think it was Tiana who said just unapologetically, and that's one of the things that I respect so much about the movement.
But yeah, I mean, like you said, it was risky, but it was honest, right?
Yes, exactly.
So the idea of risk is, what's the opposite of risk? Opportunistic, you know. And like I said, go and look at that report. I read the whole report, and last night. That's why I had to take a long nap today. They said that it was a 3-hour presentation, and I read the whole report last night. You know, for over 2 hours, I was on my living room floor reading it and reading the way in which that struggle played out. Right, the Mwambi talked about the white socialist organizations, or and more importantly, what the party calls the ideological imperialists, who opportunistically put forward certain socialist positions that they feel appeal to the African masses, oftentimes not even appealing to the African masses, right? One thing that the party rejects is the black belt thesis, which was opportunistically put out by the CP in 1928. And one of the greatest quotes that I read from that 1981 conference was somebody stands up and says, you know what? I joined this party because of African internationalism, because of African liberation, not because of no damn black belt South theory. You know, because why would we? So the position of the party there is, look, we can't stand in solidarity with Palestinians, we can't stand in solidarity with Native people, and then also have an ideology that suggests that a sort of what the party call a neo-Zionist ideology that suggests that we are owed part of indigenous people's land here within the United States. And then what does it also suggest about our relationship? So yeah, you all are absolutely correct. You know, the opposite
Hey, comrade,
yeah.
did
So
you say neo-Zionist?
Yeah. So that's what that's how they referred to it then, was neo-Zionist.
We need to bring that back.
I know, right?
Yeah, I never heard that. It's perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah, because I think I called it like white settler fantasies or something like that. That's baked into our ideology. So Deandra, Kumba, y'all want to say something?
Uhuru. I think something that really came up for me was in thinking of like most socialist governments that came into place throughout history have been suffocated by like the international entity of global capitalism. So that's another reason why it's really crucial that we stand in solidarity without borders, because there can be no like individual liberation without internationalism. Uhuru.
On point, on point. I really appreciate that, because that's central to internationalism as well, right? The reason why we need an international revolution, because of the fact that, as you notice, even in places where socialist revolution has taken place that we're sympathetic to, without it being international revolution, international upheaval of the working class with the African working class at the tip of that spear, it's easy to just suffocate it, and then they suffocate it. Then they do what I refer to as cause one historian suggests, consequence masqueraded as history. You know, they say, well, you can't have a socialist revolution because look at Cuba's economy. Right, as if it hasn't had two boots on its throat trying to for the last 60 years, but instead, and people say, yeah, well, that is true, as opposed to saying the opposite, saying, look at the fight that they've had to survive over the last 60 years, while the greatest empire since the Romans has tried to kill it, right? And that's the legacy that we uphold. So I think you're on point. I think maybe Kumba, and then we can move to the next.
Yeah, am I coming through pretty clearly here?
Yeah, perfect. Nice to see you, Kumba.
Likewise, very well. Good to see all you comrades. One of the things that there's much that can be said about this whole concept of African internationalism, but one of the things that it brought to my mind was it is the antithesis or the antithesis, depends on how one likes to say that word, to colonialism and settler colonialism. So in other words, it's in contradiction to the whole balkanization that has occurred to Africans, and it comes to become the solution. So then that African internationalism breaks down all these borders. So there is no, like we've already said, there is no Afro-Cuban, there's no Afro-Brazilian, there's no African-American, there's no Nigerian, there's none of those nomenclatures that are false nomenclatures. There are just one people, and that's African people. So African internationalism lets us spill over into the world wherever we are, in like more than 113 countries in the world, right? So we can go to the continent of Africa. We know we can go to Canada with African internationalism. We can go to Zimbabwe. We can go to France. We can go to anywhere in Europe. We can go to Italy. We might not go there. We can go to China, but we can go anywhere in the world with African internationalism and bring the concepts that the party has laid out and unite everybody. So that's the beauty of it, Uhuru. That was kind of wrong though, but I had to put it in since I said it
Mhm.
about Italy.
I appreciate you. I really do. All right, let's move on. Unless you want to say something very briefly, Marquise, and actually, Marquise, you'll really appreciate the next reading, and same with you, Kevin. So let's move to the next reading. So with this next reading, I want us to just read the first section of Nicaragua Will Win, and then we will read the entire second article, which is Movements for Power to the People in Central America and the Black Revolution of the 80s. 3 years apart, but nevertheless, it's the product of the party's engagement in the liberation of the people of Central America. What some people might not know is going all the way back to the 1920s with the original Sandinista rebellion, the Sandinos rebellion back in the 1920s. It was the writings of Marcus Garvey that mobilized workers, indigenous workers and African workers against U.S. imperialism and neo-colonial, neo-imperialist rulers down in Nicaragua. It's important to note that Nicaragua in the 19th century was invaded by a guy by the name of William Walker. William Walker was what they called a filibusterer, which was just like the way in which people invaded Texas. This process of really say global mercenaries traveling the Western Hemisphere, really trying to create a hemispheric American slave empire, had taken people like William Walker over into Central America. Walker was eventually assassinated and overthrown, but nevertheless, in the 1950s and later, when 1920s, the 50s, and later, when the people of Nicaragua rebelled, they have never forgotten the long history of American intervention and stifling of the self-determination of the people, of the working class of Latin America. So let's go on and open up this reading. Marquise or Kevin, are you able to begin? And like I said, we're just going to read until actually until the second section. The struggle against imperialism is not complex.
Okay, this is Kevin. So again, you want to go to the Nicaragua Will Win, just the first section?
Actually, read through the second section. Well, you can read the first section, and then Marquise can read the second section. I'll cut off Marquise where he should stop. But
okay, so I opened it up, and it's the newspaper article, right?
Uhuru.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Uhuru.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So page 4 of the African People's Socialist Party. Nicaragua will win. The following presentation was made on February 2nd in San Francisco at the Women's Building. O'Malley had just returned from an 8-day visit to Nicaragua, where he attended the first international conference in solidarity with Nicaragua. O'Malley's presentation deals with his Nicaragua visit, the conference, and the significance of the Nicaraguan Revolution for the anti-imperialist movement and the Black liberation movement in the United States. Comrades, O'Malley Yeshitela greeting Cristina Vasquez from the Colombian Front for Socialism following the California Summit. And there's a picture of them greeting each other there. All right, the first paragraph. Uhuru. We usually start our presentation with that word. Uhuru in Swahili, it means freedom. It became the very important slogan during the very time of the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya. You probably heard of the Mau Mau. We greet each other with that word, freedom, and when we separate from each other, we say Uhuru. We do that because we think that Uhuru, freedom, ought to be the most important thing on our minds all the time, 24 hours a day. And this is where it kind of skips a little bit. The committee and the comrades who have come out tonight, the comrades who did all the work that made it possible to our party to participate in the historic conference in Nicaragua. Continue.
Wait, where did you leave off?
At the end of the first paragraph.
Yeah.
I just saw a very dear friend, two dear friends, sort of distracting. I didn't know who they were. Comrades from Colombia. Colombia is going to win too. Then there was applause. I know they're going to win because I saw other Colombians as well standing on the free territory of Nicaragua, and they were there telling me that Colombia is going to win too. It was a very good experience for the African People's Socialist Party to be in Nicaragua. It was like a good experience for us, especially the old timers like myself. This is ironic, standing here calling myself an old timer. I remember early in the movement days, the press would like to refer to me as Joseph Walker, a young militant, as a way to discredit me. I'm going to be back in that city in a couple of weeks where it all started, for me anyway. And it's going to be interesting to see how they discredit me this nowadays. But for most of my life, I've been consciously involved in the struggle, and to get off the airplane in Managua and to see a revolutionary banner that had a relationship to reality in the world, to see a revolutionary banner that had a real relationship to reality, that is the first important and striking kind of thing. That is to say, it was not a banner that had been stuck up at one of our rallies. And I love our rallies because I think our banners have a relationship with reality too. That's the reality of our ability to see the future.
All right, I'll pick up here. To walk through the airport and to see the youth, to see the future of Nicaragua in the eyes of the youth. You know, in Nicaragua, 50% of the population is 15 years or younger. So in the airport, there were all of these self-assured young people who were acting in positions of authority, and to look into the eyes of the youth and to know that they can see the future, that's different than what we see in the eyes of the youth in this country, isn't it? Our youth doesn't see the future, or they see what they think is the future, and it's dreadful, a dreadful thing that leads to drugs and various kinds of superstitions. Take them away from. Hold on one second. Drugs and things that take them away from the people and take their consciousness away from themselves. But that's not the case in Nicaragua today. Today in Nicaragua, we see the peasants, the poor working people who yesterday were uneducated and in some ways in quite similar conditions of existence as those of Black people in this country that I grew up with. Today, those people are close to having their own destiny in their hands. And that's one of the very profound things that I saw about Nicaragua as someone who has been involved in the struggle for a long time, to see in many different ways the things that I have fought for, that our party has fought for, and that we do fight for, to see it concretized in Nicaragua. When I got to Nicaragua after the first day or so, because it was a very good experience, and because there were a tremendous number of very good people there who excited our imagination in many ways. I was anxious to get back because of the work which had to be done here. Second day, I was really impatient to get back because of the work I was reminded of over and over again by the success of the Nicaraguan Revolution. Anxious to get back because of the work which has to be done here. Third day, I was really anxious. And on the morning, yeah, and on the morning when it was time for me to leave, I stood waiting to go to the airport, and I cried. I had a very deep sadness because I had become a part of the process, and that process, and truly the revolution in Nicaragua belongs to all the oppressed and toiling masses on the face of the earth. They understand that very clearly. It's articulated on every corner. It's articulated by 18-year-old young men and women who lectured me and others with more gray in their hair than what I have about the need for all peoples of the world to work together in solidarity to destroy imperialism. So I'll just read this next part because I think this is crucial. The struggle against imperialism is not as complex as some people would have us to believe it is. The struggle against imperialism is the struggle to do exactly the things that the Nicaraguan people have been involved in for the last 20 years. And the people of El Salvador are involved in now. And the people in Iran are involved in now and have been involved in. It's not complicated at all. It's a struggle for the right to eat. It's a struggle for the right to have jobs. It's a struggle for the right for our children to live and to anticipate a future. It's not complicated thing. It's a struggle for the right for human dignity to be realized, so there won't be any exploitation and oppression. So we're going to shift to the next article, but what came out of this period of the party is the slogan bread, peace, and Black power. So when you see in 1981 the party adopt the slogan bread, peace, and Black power, this is precisely you can read here in his experience and in this quote right here about the fact that say the struggle against imperialism isn't a complex thing, right? You can even insert as a paraphrase that it's a struggle for bread, peace, and Black power. So let's shift to the next reading. For the sake of time, I'll see how much we might cut this one a little short, just reading the introduction and the conclusion. But let's shift to the next reading, and then we will discuss both of these readings together. So if you got some questions, go on and write those questions down so that you don't lose it, or comments or whatever like that, and then we'll come back to that stuff in a couple minutes. So let's go.
I'll read out some questions in the live chat. If there's folks in the live chat also that have questions or comments, I'll read those out when we come up to the group discussion.
Okay, perfect. All right, Marquise, can you kick off the reading? Are you in a position to read? Hold on.
Second paragraph.
Hey, Marquise, can you kick off the reading?
Yeah, just give me a second. I'm loading it up on my computer right. Oh, not my computer, on my phone right now.
All right. Well, we'll go with somebody else. But anybody else able, and then I'll pass the next section off to you.
All right.
I can kick it off.
Okay.
Okay, the movements for power to the people in Central America in the Black Revolution of the 80s. Oakland, California. In August, a member of the African People's Socialist Party, who was working among the African population on the Atlantic coast of Nicaragua, came to Oakland and gave a report of the critical situation today in Central America. Since the Sandinistas completed 18 years of protracted people's war with the defeat of the U.S. puppet government and the establishment of popular power in 1979, they have been struggling to establish the independent power of the people to solve their own problems. In the Atlantic coast, where the English-speaking descendants of African slaves occupy such fishing towns as Bluefields, this meant the establishment of Black power for the Black community. It has meant building a new hospital to what is that? Reduce the infant mortality rate from 200 per 1,000 live births to 40. It has meant establishing new schools in every village. It has meant taking back control of the fishing industry so that the harvest from the sea the Nicaraguan people.
We're getting a little distortion, so
Oh, yeah?
let's pass it off to somebody else.
I'm still trying to get it going.
Is anybody else able to pick up?
Yeah, okay, go ahead, comrade.
Okay. I'm going to start at the top of the second paragraph. It has meant establishing new schools in every village. It has meant taking back control of the fishing industry so that the harvest from the sea goes to feed the Nicaraguan people or to sell at prices, which result in real income for the people's needs. And it has meant unleashing a popular culture of African music to replace the white nationalist country music which had dominated the region. But the US government is not willing to see its profits threatened by such a popular power in Bluefields any more than it is in Oakland. We must understand this so we can advance the African Revolution and the workers' revolution on all fronts as the only way to secure our people's rights and lives. Today, the US Central Intelligence Agency is mounting constant assaults against the Nicaraguan Revolution, and the Atlantic coast is one of the main targets. The Contras, counter-revolutionaries, do not directly attack the Sandinista military forces, but instead go to the homes of teachers in remote communities, kidnap them, cut off their ears and genitals, stuff them in their mouth, and then shoot them. They come to the home of a local fishing co-op leader and murder the entire family. Such are the methods of the US government in Nicaragua. It should be clear for anyone to see that the problems the Nicaraguans face are not the local bourgeoisie, not the former National Guardsmen, not the contradictions between the Atlantic and the Pacific region of the country. The problem is US imperialism, which has spent $100 million in the last 2 years alone to fight the Nicaraguan people. But unfortunately, most of the North American left, those who have taken upon themselves the responsibility for solidarity with Nicaragua and El Salvador, have been unable or unwilling to face this simple fact and its implications. They have done a much worse job than the US government has done in summing up the lessons of the 1960s in order to advance the revolution of the 1980s. Should I continue?
We could pass it off to somebody else.
I can go.
Okay, yeah. So finish up this section, and then we'll jump all the way down to the end of the next page.
We who are in the whirlwind of the struggle for Black power cannot forget the important lessons of the 1960s. We understand the unity of the anti-colonial struggle of peoples outside the current U.S. borders and the dialectic between the advances of these struggles. The area of the 60s saw the Black workers take over virtually every major U.S. city, tear down the colonialist politicians, and send the police scurrying for the safety of their garrisons of imperialism instead of standing firmly for the revolutionary victory there. Taking up a stance firmly with the liberal bourgeoisie, these forces repeat no Vietnam War in Central America. Apparently, This is the appeal to the liberal bourgeoisie to avoid another demoralizing and costly defeat in El Salvador. But we who consider Vietnam the great victory of our era to be claimed and celebrated by all freedom-loving peoples call for the victory in El Salvador as in Vietnam.
Okay, so let's move to the second page, and let's read the final 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs on that page.
The last 4 paragraphs?
Yeah, starting with we will remember the killings between the various. So,
Okay,
so the part before that sort of talks about the factionalism, the horizontal violence, and stuff like that taking place in the Central American struggles, and then it moves towards a sort of a dialectical analysis of the horizontal violence that emerged in the colonial violence of the Black Power movement.
Okay.
Where you at, comrade?
Sorry, the second page, the 4th paragraph on the right-hand side from the bottom, that begins, we will remember the killings between.
We will remember the killings between various factions of the Black Panther Party or between the Panthers and other nationalist formations, and how the left stood by and complained or attacked the movement in its hour of greatest need. But these killings reflected, first, the intervention of U.S. intelligence agents who carried out assassinations, and secondly, the sharp struggle over how to move when the movement faced objective military and political barriers that meant the stated goals were not to be realized in the current period. Some of our revolutionary comrades were pushed into opportunism and compromised by the opportunism of the white left. Some took up arms in assault they knew was premature, but which must be made for memories of future generations. Today, the Nicaraguan revolution is facing concrete limits on its ability to consolidate and must decide every day what level of compromise must be made to preserve the revolution. Given this most difficult situation, it is obscene to see the white left jump up and say, no, they aren't communists there. They are just innocent reformers like us. When the very inaction of the white left is what puts the brakes on the progress towards socialism and communism. Today, the Salvadoran Revolution is facing the same crisis because of the U.S. military and political assaults. The North American left has gotten lazy, imagines that the revolutionary forces will always march into the capital one day, like they did in Saigon in 1975, in Managua in 1979. But it takes work and struggle. And before such a victory can be realized, and the Salvadorans can face defeat, especially if the North American left can't get beyond the Hubert Humphrey protege Mondale. Today we are struggling.
Mondale.
Today we are struggling to march on Oakland with the people's forces to unleash the revolutionary process around the world by heightening it inside the belly of the beast. The North American left and the Social Democrats have set themselves up as a part of the problem. But the working people of the world have a solution. Sooner or later, we will have a solution. Independence, or did I say that last part? Independence and socialism on our lifetime.
All right, uhuru, everybody, uhuru. So let's go on and enter into our discussion. We got a little bit over 10 minutes allotted for discussion. If you want to speak, feel free to unmute yourself. Marquise, you want to begin the reaction, the discussion?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and go. I'm just trying to process some of the stuff I was reading.
Okay, we can.
Uhuru, I could go ahead and kick off the discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a lot. It was really, really inspiring. It was really cool because it kept bringing it back to, you know, the dialectical process and how, you know, the struggle in Nicaragua is tied to the struggle of Africans here in the United States, and how, you know, really through this revolutionary process and, you know, understanding, you know, the collective process, you know, we borrow from each other. You know what I'm saying? When, you know, the things that Chairman learned in Nicaragua, he brought here to the US. And I think, you know, understanding like African internationalism it's a theory that has to have practice. If practice isn't behind it, then it doesn't exist. And, you know, just reading all these, it just like, I'm like understanding how that international process has really, you know, given strength to all the different areas of the struggle, whether it be from, you know, Africans on the continent to, you know, the comrades in Venezuela, or, you know, even in Iran, you know, here, Nicaragua, you know, here in the United States, like regardless, you know, this has really helped me to understand how everything is just so tied together. So, you know, translating into us, it just makes me realize how we just have to hold down our front, you know, like just do the work that we have to do, like the best we can do it. Cause I'm like listening to the chairman and I'm just like, man, he was putting it down, you know what I mean? But yeah, Uhuru, that was dope. I appreciate that, comrade.
All right, Uhuru, anybody else? Kevin, I don't know, have you spoken yet, Kevin? I don't want to overlook you. Oh, Kevin might not be, Kevin might not be there anymore. Okay. All right, go for it.
So what this reading has me thinking about is just even how the war against us even filtered up to South Central, and you had, you know, allegedly Nicaraguan agents that were, you know, peddling drugs to fund the war, to fund the contras, to resist the revolution down there. But at the same time, it has the same objective up here, you know, as far as trying to squash out the resistance of people up here, especially in places like Oakland and in Los Angeles. I don't know if you could see that connection, or I'm assuming you could, but that's just what it has me thinking about, making that connection, you know.
Yeah, because one of the things that you see the chairman does, right, is he begins by talking about the hopefulness in the eyes of the children in Nicaragua, because they have grown up in this revolutionary period and they've seen revolutionary success. But he also dialectically compares that to the struggle of African youth in the U.S. Because of the counterinsurgency. Well, it's very clear at that time that sort of the counterinsurgency is taking place, but what's not clear at that moment is exactly what hindsight shows us now, is the fact that Reagan and others, the CIA, Bush, was funding were funding or allowing for the funding of the reactionary counter-revolution with the Contras in Nicaragua, for them introducing crack and stuff like that to the community. So this is 1984, and we know that Oakland, California in 1984 is actually theoretically the epicenter of this counterinsurgency. The the use of crack. But we also know that through party literature that that counterinsurgency goes all the way back to the attempt to overthrow the revolutionary movements in Southeast Asia. And so there's a connection between the counterinsurgency and the attempt to overthrow the Vietnamese Revolution with and its connections to the heroin trade. So we see after this the connections to the Central American revolutions and the rise of the crack cocaine epidemic at this moment. And so we can see live reporting, right? So that African internationalism, that dialectical analysis allows for the chairman to materially say, hey, you know, we know that there's clearly some sort of connection taking place between what the youth here are experiencing and what the youth there are experiencing, even before the stuff becomes completely overt. But it's important to note that the guy named Gary Webb, who wrote the book Dark Alliance, unearthing some of this stuff, much of his original studies came from the pages of the Burning Spear. Remember, he was in San Jose. The party was very influential in the struggles in San Jose as well. There were early alliances with Central American and Mexican indigenous forces over there as well. The early, Chicano-Mexicano Prison Project, Union del Barrio, stuff like that, as well as the different Central American and South American revolutionary fronts. And so Gary Webb took a lot of his writings and his understanding and perspective from the writings of the paper of the Burning Spear. This is absolutely crucial, I want to say, because of the fact that, remember, it's at this time that other people in the name of Black Power are aligning with the state, calling for more police on the street, helping prosecute and send people away. Stigmatizing African mothers and the welfare system, whereas the party defended the right of people, but understanding that, like, hey, you know, it doesn't go far enough. We need a full redistribution. So in those reparation demands, saying, look, you know, we need to sort of defend the African community against the onslaught against the social welfare programs, but also understand that we really need an actual social welfare system that brings dignity to African people and stuff like that. All that stuff is actually within that sort of 1981 Congress report that I was reading last night, and I've got some excerpts of it on my Facebook page that I'm willing to share with you all. But I think that sort of that really shows the unapologetic and sort of non-opportunistic position. But it's not sort of out of nowhere, right? It's baked into the dialectical materialism of African internationalism. So who else? We got about 5 minutes and then we'll transition to the last reading.
Uhuru, this is Kumba. You can tell when the chairman went over there to Nicaragua and things of that nature, that he was somewhat humble. That along the lines, it was in talking about the youth, I'm not sure exactly where it is, but he mentioned the fact that he was taught as well. So you go with African internationalism, having a theory and knowing that the theory is sound and you can help bring about change, but you got to also be humble to know what has occurred where you are, where you've gone to rather to visit, and to know from the people what they want to do to improve their lot versus you saying that, oh yeah, I'm a revolutionary, I got all the answers, I'm gonna come over here, I'm gonna make these changes and tell you what to do. No, that's not what you do with African internationalism as that theory and practice behind you. You go, you listen, you observe, you be a guest. It's like going to anybody's house and being a polite guest. You sit down, you don't touch nothing. You ask where the bathroom is. You just don't go walking around and doing things. You just got to be that humble in that regard. And you can see a little bit of that in the delivery, what the chairman was doing back in the day. And I think that's a part of African internationalism that can't even be overlooked.
Yeah, no, it can't be overlooked at all, right? There was I was reading recently Groundings with My Brothers by Walter Rodney. And one of the things Walter Rodney, it's interesting because a lot of people, when they talk about African history, they want to talk about the kings, the queens, the empire, stuff like that. But if you notice in the party history and party literature, party literature, we're far more concerned with the lives of everyday African working people than just the sort of representational politics of the fact that like we once were kings and queens. But that also guides African internationalism, because one thing Rodney talks about is sort of, you know, not just about these great empires, but the vast majority of people lived as humble, everyday, honest people, and that's the essence of African character. So I think that thing that you noted about sort of the humility, the willingness of the chairman to express his own humility, and even the idea that like he cried, right, when he was parting, that I think that sort of really shows the essence of African internationalism. And yeah, so cool. Let's hear from a couple more people, and then we can move to the last reading.
Uhuru. I want to talk about, I took a little notes here. And I like when the chairman was talking about seeing things we fight for come to reality. This was very inspirational for me because it makes me look at my children and all of our children and think about them. And, you know, a lot of times, I don't remember where I read it, but it said, you know, every revolutionary, like the revolution is inherited, right? So when we look at, you know, things from the past, we can connect it to now. And it's amazing how things from the past are so connected to now. We can so get everything that we need now for our leadership from the leaders of the past. And when the chairman talks about to look into the eyes of the youth and see the way, see that they can see the future, that was very touching. And again, it connects us. When we think about we have to all be connected everywhere. And a lot of times, like for example, I had a discussion with a brother that I believe he was in South Africa, and he said, you know, basically questioned me of why I call myself African. And then he said, you can call yourself Black, but you can't call yourself African. And he said this to say that because you don't know our struggle and you don't know what we go through every day, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, me and a couple other people explained, yes, we do know, you know, we don't have to have the exact same thing to go through things to connect and to say, okay, you know what, well, over here we have those same issues where we're, you know, we have higher loans on us, or we're denied jobs, we don't get paid like we should, you know, we're thrown into prison and getting higher sentences, all of these things. We can always find a connection, like the brother said. African internationalism is everywhere. We can find that everywhere. We can find the connection. So that's what I got from the reading. Oh, and Uhuru should be on the mind 24/7. I think that's important. I like how we greet each other with Uhuru. So the fact that it means freedom, and that freedom should be on our mind 24/7. This helps me a lot when I say Uhuru. It reminds me, you know, what I'm fighting for: bread, peace, or struggle for bread, peace, and Black power. Uhuru.
One thing I'd say, just in short, right? The party's position is simple. We're African because we say we are. You know, we're African because, I mean, you can go even further and say things like, sure. I mean, as a historian, I would say, hey, if a person all the way in Sudan and South Africa, which is actually geographically further away from each other than Florida and Nigeria, or Brazil and Nigeria, are African, then Africans in diaspora remain African. And, you know, it's sort of, this is what has us reject the ideological imperialism of white socialists, which basically in the Black Belt thesis suggested that enslavement made us a different group of people, even though opportunistically they weren't trying to say that, like, You know, they opportunistically they would suggest that, oh, we're not saying that you're not African or something, but basically that's their thing, right? They were going off of what Du Bois said, and this idea that being enslaved made us less African, and that's something that the party vehemently rejects. There's that one part where the chairman talks about us being the people caught in the whirlwind. So I mean that's clearly a reference to Garvey and the legacy of Garvey, who we uphold as well. So let's hear from a couple more people, and then we'll move to the last article.
Uhuru. Jumping off of what you just said, I think it's been really helpful for me to think about being African in America as being a part of a displaced peoples. And I think that definitely helps us connect ourselves to the larger global population of displaced peoples who, like in America, indigenous peoples who have been displaced from their land, to South America, indigenous peoples who have been displaced from their land, because we're all just, you know, falling under that same power structure of colonialism. Uhuru.
All right, Uhuru, Maito, I see you itching. You want to jump in?
My brother. Yeah, well, you know, one thing it was a couple of things that were interesting, but I noticed how, if you noticed how it said that they didn't attack the Sandinista army soldiers directly, but they would go into the homes of you know, the regular people and do all kind of vicious things to them. And it reminds me of the same thing that imperialism does to this very day. You know, we see that going on in Venezuela now with these bogus claims about, you know, President Maduro being a drug dealer, the kingpin, you know what I mean, down in Venezuela. These attempts to undermine the revolutionary movements by attacking the people, you know what I mean, and trying to turn the people against the government that is actually fighting on their behalf. You know what I mean? We see that and have seen that in Cuba for so long, constantly trying to undermine Castro and the movement that they have going on there, and do these sanctions and all of these embargoes to try and starve the people out, you know what I mean? And then constantly through this media, the propaganda, because, you know, capitalism, it makes you feel like you're only happy when you obtain things, right? You got to have the car. When you have the car, now you're happy, you know what I mean? When you can have the house and the picket fence, that's what brings you happiness, you know what I mean? And so you get this situation where you starve the people off. You don't allow resources to be traded or, you know, bartered or whatnot, and you allow the people to be stuck in poverty and inflation and hunger. And then the goal is to make them turn against their government, right? If it wasn't for you, we'd be better off if we just go back to being up under the Yankees, you know what I mean? And so I think that that's important for us to realize and to understand that they haven't changed. And here's the irony of it. Like we see with this government right now, currently up under Trump, and of course we know it ain't about Trump, right? It's the whole imperialist machine. But with this coronavirus and the shortage of these masks, and so on one hand, you have this government not allowing different countries to trade with each other, to show solidarity. So you don't have masks, we have masks. We're going to send some to you so that you can help, you know, treat your people and prevent some of these casualties. But here's the arrogance of American imperialism steps in, and it prevents that trading from happening. It prevents that solidarity. But at the same time, the contradiction, the hypocrisy is that America controls the resources of every other place in the world. You won't allow other countries to have control of their own resources to treat their people, but yet you're saying you're not going to allow masks to be sent to other places because we need them here for our people. You see what I'm saying? Like we can't give out these resources because our people at home are in need. Yet you're in other countries and not even allowing them to use their own resources for their people. You see what I'm saying? You're extracting and exploiting their resources, you know, for your economic gain and exploitation. I think that we just, and the other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit briefly was, you know, when the chairman was talking about him being inspired and like, as the brother said, taught by the youth. And I think that that's important. I remember President Chavez did an excellent job of that in Venezuela as well, in getting the everyday people to understand their struggle and their fundamental contradiction with imperialism and their fundamental participation in their liberation and their freedom, and that they all participated in the development of their constitution. Everybody walked around with that copy of their constitution in their back pocket. And I remember doing some studying and watching some film, and I mean, from the brothers on the street, staggering drunk, was still able to pull out his constitution and be able to articulate the struggle that they have for liberation and self-determination. And I think that that's something that's we need to kind of up our game as it relates to our young people in this country. We're so distracted, and we know that it's intentional and it's an attack. It's a part of that counterinsurgency. It continues on with all of the distractions of, and we know that the petty bourgeoisie, they play an important role in not allowing our young people to fully internalize our struggle. You know what I mean? It's just this constant search for making it to the league and in sports and entertainment, and they keep us so distracted. And we just need to, I think we need to, I mean, we are, but I think we need to continue to heighten that struggle there, that contradiction, so that we can get our young people and the everyday people to be able to internalize the struggle that we have for self-determination. So I got a little long-winded there. Ooh.
All right, yeah, Huru, we saw that, right? We saw the chairman even say exactly what you said about how, like, they made certain concessions in popular culture for Africans, but while at the same time waging counterinsurgency against Africans, and never a transfer of resources back to African people, which then I think sort of like even sets up the contradiction which we talk about, that Africans only want, you know, young Africans want to be rappers or athletes or something like that. So it's like, it's almost like the way in which, like I said, colonial violence, colonialism overdetermined that, right? You know, you know, so this, they lift those people up, especially opportunistically, to put African images from the U.S. all around the world, at the exact same moment that they're waging a counterinsurgency against Africans. And then sort of when the young Africans experiencing the counterinsurgency say, well, shoot, you know, I want to be like them dudes right there, because they don't seem to be under the have the same boot on their head that we have on, you know, what the other cats, you know, what the liberals and other stuff says. You know, the problem is, you know, these guys, they can't dream to be something else. Whereas what the movement is something. The problem is, first and foremost, the other people who they would have wanted to be like got assassinated and thrown in jail, and you know, all the other stuff that you were just talking about. So yeah, thanks. So let's move to the next article. Unless someone feels like just a burning desire to hop in. You can. I don't want to silence you, but we still have one more reading to go. Maitho talked about this. You know, he referred to the mask and the COVID virus as being a colonial virus, and that's precisely our position. And like I said, I really unite with your analysis there about the resources. And in many ways, you know, I believe that when we see even how Africans in the U.S. are being impacted, the different access, right? You know, a lot of, once again, you know, even the liberal or the ideological imperialist analysis of some socialists still sort of wants to blame Africans, right? I mean, you know, I've lived in different parts of the U.S. You live in different parts of the U.S. Africans in Southeast aren't eating anything different than Africans are eating in Chicago, in Cleveland, in St. Louis, in Detroit, in Milwaukee, in Brooklyn, where Africans walk around with spinach smoothies, but they catching hell right now, right? So I know for sure it's we can't just simply say, oh, Africans got all these things, you know, diabetes, hypertension, blah blah blah. That's why they're dying. Like, no, they're dying because of the resources, like you talked about, right? Africans are being sent home instead of being given the ventilators that they need to help their lungs be strong against this. Africans aren't being distributed mass, even though we know that Africans live in higher density households and closer to each other. Whereas if you come to a place like San Diego, you know, a white bourgeois, the white bourgeoisie drive from home. If they still go to work, they drive to work, then they drive home, they park inside a garage, they get out and they go and see their family, and they don't even know their neighbors. So social distancing in that sense just becomes a newer way to talk about segregation, right? To talk about colonialism and the distance created between Africans and colonized people and settler populations, right? So that's why, you know, we talking about socialist distancing, right? How can we sort of promote health, but at the same time promote togetherness of our people? Because we know that sort of baked into the reforms to flatten the curve and get us out of this crisis are not solutions that are going to put the health of Africans in, like I said. So I said, you know, that's where every single place we see the uptick right now and Africans really catching hell, we see the Africans have been catching hell for the last 400 years. But of course, when we talk about the sort of de-industrial cities, post-industrial cities, you know, it's not a coincidence. Chicago, Detroit, Milwaukee, where the white North Americans have still experienced economic boom, while Africans are catching hell. One guy recently said that the way in which Detroit is catching hell, Africans in Detroit are catching hell, it sort of pulls the veil off of this whole myth of the sort of a new Detroit, and that they were using as a tool of gentrification. So let's go on and open up this this last article, which is a next front, identifies the next front in imperialist, anti-imperialist struggle and internationalist struggle, African internationalist struggle, South Africa. So anybody able to kick off this article? It's not a very long article, so we'll have a good amount of time for discussion, and then we'll wrap up. Darius?
Read? Yeah, I haven't read yet, so I can take this. I can start this off. So Project Black Ankh response to COVID-19 epidemic in occupied Azania, South Africa. That's Teferi Mugeri, chair of the APSP South Africa, Gauteng province, South Africa. As COVID-19 spreads throughout the world with numbers skyrocketing in many countries daily, the African People's Socialist Party comrades on the ground in occupied Azania recognize that the struggle we are waging against our colonial enemies is taking place in a fast and changing world where events change overnight. Throughout all the panic and over the threat of the coronavirus in occupied Azania, the response, or lack of one, by the neo-colonial government has proved that what Chairman O'Malley said. The African working class does not have a government, let alone a country. That's why our party is taking power into our own hands through the People's War strategy. Throughout the colonized communities here during the COVID-19 lockdown, we've not seen any activity by local neo-colonial counselors or politicians to help our people protect themselves from the threat of the virus. Instead, these sellouts are preoccupied with protecting only themselves and their immediate families. Even the preachers who always require members to show up in their churches and pay tithe have not made any suggestion that they will, as a moral duty, assist our people in preparing themselves in case the coronavirus spreads to our neighborhoods. From the outreach we've done, the residents of Fochville, Everton, West PNR, and Mobella, Mbambla, just 2 days before the lockdown, we see the impact of the disorganization in our communities. We are in Gauteng province, which is the greatest wealth in the country, but where African workers are forced to live in townships made up of corrugated tin shacks in our own land with no running water and without basic necessities of life. Not far away, the white collar suburb of Sandton is said to be the richest per square mile in Africa based on our stolen labor and land. All of our colonized communities have been hit by the surprise with the abrupt announcement of the lockdown that has far-reaching implications on the ability of our people to ensure the means of substance during the 21-day period of shutting down small businesses in order to satisfy the interests of big capitalist outlets. Not only do we find ourselves with communities that are unprepared for the threat of coronavirus and hunger being imposed by the state, but we also see that our communities are not prepared for the aggression that naturally comes with the presence of colonial police and military deployed to contain us. As it was stated by the director for the Better Life Association, Asa Anpu, on the WhatsApp platform, the African working class inside South Africa is in two kinds of danger, the current one being the coronavirus, the second being the South African state. Notwithstanding the organization that characterizes our communities, it rests upon us as organizers to win our people to the understanding of what the state really is and the need to organize ourselves for the security and the well-being of our the whole colonized community. We've already succeeded in initiating the process of building community COVID-19 Project Black Ankh direct response teams that use the WhatsApp as a platform for communication. We are building the People's War Campaign to take political and economic power into our own hands, to show that we can solve our own problems and expose the neo-colonial government as an empty shell of white power repression to African workers. We are winning. Uhuru.
All right, Uhuru. Let's go ahead with the response to this. Whoever would like to begin, go for it.
Uhuru. One thing that stuck out to me in the article was the point made that we don't have any government. You know, we're left to fend for ourselves as we've been left for a long time. So I thought this was important and speaks to self-determination and basically tells us what we need to be doing, that we're all we got. We have to take care of each other because we cannot depend on the state. The state has failed us over and over again. You know, we on our political education, we hear the things about what happened with Hurricane Katrina mentioned. So it's no different when we go to the colonial virus or the coronavirus. It's no different. We don't look to the stimulus checks and all of that stuff. You know, we look to ourselves, and we've been having to do for ourselves for a long time. So we are used to fighting the colonial virus. So that stuck out to me a lot. And just like the work that we have to do as, the people, it's the people against the state, it's the people against the system. And it's no different of where we're at, whether we're here in South Africa. It's no different that we're all fighting colonial virus. So I appreciate that article for that.
Uhuru. Hey, Darius, have any questions come in online that have gone unanswered?
Not yet, no. No, there's no comments in the live stream yet.
Okay. Anyone else? Well, if you go and look at the party, back in the 1980s, like I said, one of the first books put out by the party was one called "A Stolen Black Labor," and it looked at this idea of domestic colonialism, or what some people call internal colonization theory. And you got a lot of activists and even academics and stuff who say, "Oh, well, we need to move beyond, that, or that's too reductive and stuff like that." But it's how else will you explain the similarity, the similitude between the experiences of Africans under neo-colonial government in Africa, and the similarities of Africans in these cities in the U.S. that have African leadership, but Africans are the ones dying the most, right? Even as people, uplift that mayor in Chicago because they make memes out of her and stuff like that, or her pants are too big for her shoes, or she rocking some wingtips or something. And I found it interesting. It's interesting the way in which we're the only ones leveling a sort of understanding of the Africans, whether they be in Chicago, Detroit, or South Africa, experiencing neo-colonial conditions. Yeah. I mean, I think this sort of, what other way to describe it, right? Yeah. Thanks.
Uhuru.
Yeah, I said. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, I just really appreciate Tafari and the comrades out in South Africa, because it's really, really good, hearing a real African internationalist, like the Black Ankh, and them doing the work that we're doing out here, on the continent, and just kind of understanding the legacy, because it's it's just been like a progression over time of the party growing and being able to even have a project like Black Ankh. And so I really appreciate that article, because it just really shows the how far the party has advanced over the decades. But yeah, Uhuru.
Uhuru. I got a couple thoughts. One being that this event is really showing the colonial character of. I think a lot of times it's hard for a lot of people to see, especially whites, as being colonized. Well, it's not hard for us to see, but I think it gets overlooked because it's so they're just everywhere. But an event like this, the first reflex is to sort of circle their own wagons and protect themselves, and like they just make it plain that they don't really care about protecting anybody else. They just out for self, and they're doing whatever they got to do to make sure they survive. That, and two, there was a part in the reading that talked about the sellouts are concerned with themselves, and that makes me. Although I don't necessarily know that, a lot of people that are celebrities or athletes would see themselves as sellouts, or they might not. They might feel like they're with the community. Sort of the role that they serve in our society. They're the first to get testing, and then they just kind of hunker down. I'm sure they got everything that they need. Meanwhile, everybody else is suffering and just trying to survive. I thought about that. And then the other part about the preachers says even the preachers who always require members to show up in their churches to pay the tithe have not made any suggestion that they will, as a moral duty, assist our people. I've seen a lot of things going around, even on my Facebook, that they're just saying pray it away. If you believe in God, why are you wearing a mask? stuff like that just doesn't make any sense. And meanwhile, they're probably at home taking care of what they got to take care of and making sure they're cool. So just seeing a lot of similarities between what I see here in the U.S. and then what's going on over in occupied Azania. Uhuru.
All right, Uhuru. Anybody else? We got about 4 more minutes, and then we'll wrap up discussion.
Hey, I would like to just say that I think, excuse me, I want to also big up Black Unk and the work that the party and Impedum has been doing, you know, that I'm seeing online. I'm not there, obviously, and getting out into the community and trying to provide resources, even if it's information alone, and how our people can, you know, practically approach this thing, because as we know, nobody else is coming to save us, right? So we have to be able to do those things ourselves, and it definitely stresses the need for us to be organized in a way that we can provide. And like, you know, we know how the party talks about theory and practice, and it's one thing to talk about being a nation and all of that, but are you practically organizing in a way that in these type of situations you can actually do something to help your people through the situation? And like, I just want to share this for people who may be listening. Like, one thing that I've been involved in here is that we call it this welfare checks, right? Welfare check. And what we're basically doing is, we know that the elderly are, as they say, are the most vulnerable to this thing. And so what we've done is we actively have went throughout this city, and we go once a week and we look, there's the different elderly centers, you know, in the African community, right? Where, you know, the whole building is Africans and they're all our elders, but they're locked up in there and they're already not as mobile. They don't have cars. They rely on public transportation. That's shut. So what we do is we, through fundraising and our own, you know, our own resources, we buy food and we put together bags of food, and we go throughout these communities and we go into these buildings and we go door to door and we hand bags of food. Now, this is not to like show my hand and looking for applause. I'm trying to share this because some of you, whatever your city you're in, you may be thinking how you can practically help and do something. And our elderly need, you know, you see these colonial clowns, these settler clowns talking about sacrificing their elders for the economy. You know what I mean? But as Africans, we need to take care of ours. And we know due to the transportation being shut down, a lot of our elders don't drive as it is. They need to eat, man. And if you're in a position, if you're in a city where it's just extremely high risk, I mean, you know, but if you can, you know, mask up, glove up, and get some of these elders some food. You know what I mean? Make sure they have some water. Real practical. Call and check on our folk, man. And you know, we can't leave them out there, man. So anyway, I just wanted to add that in there.
Yeah, no, that really hit home, you know, because my mom, you know, I was thinking about my mother right now, who's back home, and, you know, I sort of thought about it. She says, you know, I've been in this house for 3 weeks,
Right.
and I'm lonely, you know. Got to talk to her. She's trying to find every reason to get out the house. Oh, can you help me buy a laptop? They said I could drive and pick it up from Best Buy. Mama, stay inside. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But you know, that's even with my mother, who's not in one of these homes and is more mobile. But you know, I really got very subjective about her post yesterday, and just saying, okay, I need to be as open as possible. FaceTime, you know, play some music, you know, just turn on your thing and watch a show with them. But then sort of use that once again, the struggle for bread, peace, and Black power. Understanding that this is a tactic, a strategy used towards African self-determination. you know, if they reopen them churches, who the people that's going to be most vulnerable? We know it's going to be our elders and stuff like that. So far from a concern about whether we're materialists or idealists or something like that, sort of the practical understanding is that sort of some of these pastors are willing to put our people in danger, our even our elders in danger. And like you said, you hit it the nail on the head. That's what sort of underscores Africanism. There's a good, before colonialism, it was not gender that really defined hierarchy in the African system, where there's a boy king and he's 9, but he could be the king. Like, no, like it was always about age, right? With age comes wisdom. So holding up our elders, whereas we see the colonial system looks at the elders and says, okay, they can't work as much, they're not as mobile, they don't have the same surplus value as young, healthy people. So we'll discard those people. That in itself really shows the stark contrast between the African internationalist perspective that you put forward, Maito, which understands that the elders are the treasures of our community, and we need to do everything to uphold them. And then I think sort of what you're talking about, self-determination, which moves it away from simple, petty bourgeois or bourgeois philanthropy or charity or something like that. No, it's basic self-determination, which we're talking about. Sometimes people think self-determination is like an individual thing. Whenever I ask students to define self-determination, I think they generally they think it's about me individually having the freedom to do things, as opposed to sort of self-determination is about the collective freedom and collective liberation of people.
Hey, come.
Yeah.
Hey, come.
Yeah.
No, I just really wanted to appreciate Maito bringing the discussion to earth, and really talking about the practical work that even with like appreciating Black Ankh for putting out the information and the work that you're doing out there in your city. And I know one of the struggles that we've been engaged in is the ideological struggle of really African people taking this thing seriously. And we've had a comrade who's lost their life to this colonial virus, and the president of Impedum, her dad passed recently, and then also Jesse Todd, who is an alderman out in St. Louis, and his daughter passed, and so I just really wanted to appreciate the party's just scientific approach, and not giving into like superstitions and just different things that could derail us and take us off into a land that wouldn't push us to do practical things. So I just wanted to appreciate the seriousness that the party is taking, and just even just everybody on this in this study is just taking it seriously. And I think that is making such a huge difference in helping other African people really stop this from getting like way too out of hand. So yeah, so I just wanted to appreciate what you were saying, Maito, and also you, Matsemela, tying in what he was saying. Uhuru.
All right, Uhuru and Deandra, I heard you jumping in, so we'll hear Deandra, then we'll close out.
Yeah, Uhuru. Building upon what you were talking about with self-determination, I think it's really beautiful and important that we are prioritizing spreading this information in our communities and trying to protect African peoples, especially in light of like recent statistics that came out about who's being mostly affected by coronavirus. It showed that in Louisiana, 70% of the deaths were African people. So I think this kind of poses like a really difficult situation, because while we have control over protecting ourselves by staying home and really like spreading that awareness in the community, it gets really difficult when people are ill and they go to hospitals and they have to then face this colonial institution of these like majority white owned hospitals and the healthcare system, and they're unable to receive adequate healthcare, and they're then like being really affected by the disease. So I don't know, I think it's definitely something to think about, because it's difficult to have self-determination in such a large like construct as a hospital or the healthcare system. And I would love to kind of like discuss that. Uhuru.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we're calling on people to join Project Black Ankh, right? And central to African internationalism is this idea of dual and contending power. We know for a fact that clearly, we don't have the hospitals that they have right now. But we got the resources or the ability to sort of raise consciousness, to have people be self-determined, and also to win the will of the people to the moment in which sort of the opportunity is in place for us to sort of create those institutions, and also create those, take control of the institutions that are in place right now, and the people will choose us. In the 1980s, however, there was a Uhuru Free Health Clinic set up by the party in Oakland. That was another article that I wanted to bring to you all, and if you're interested in it, I can share it with you all about the party's free health clinic that was in place in the past. But like I said, I mean, we got AppDep, we got a Project Black Ankh, sort of African determined emergency response. But like so there are certain things we can do. We can sift through the nonsense, sift through the confusion, sift through the conspiracy theories being promoted. Last night I found out that there was this meme circulating suggesting that vaccine testing has already begun in Africa, and 7 children were killed by vaccines in Senegal, and everyone's circulating it. But so I'm that person that people always inbox and say, "Is this true?" And then I'm like, "That's a meme." So I mean, my gut says no. So I research it, and no, it's absolutely not true. But even worse, you know what's happened is during the Ebola and the Zika moment, European imperialist NATO forces and others were in Africa telling Africans on the ground that the vaccines were essentially ineffective. Even at the same time that they promote having vaccines for their own children, the forces were on the ground telling Africans not to take the vaccines. Right? This is what sort of asks for us to really concern. Now we approach everything with sort of African internationalism and stuff like that, and concern for being against colonial medicine. But like I said, white nationalists are telling people to trying to convince Africans not to take the vaccine. That when we know that white people are lining up themselves right now to be the actual test, the lab rats for the coronavirus vaccine here in North America, but white nationalists are spreading the idea that like Africans are dying from the vaccine, even though we know there's not a coronavirus vaccine. Why? What's their goal? Their goal is to kill Africans and stuff like that, to aid in this. So that's just me throwing something out there, but I think sort of that's really been the struggle. How can I, over these last month, allow for African internationalism to guide my criticism and understanding of the colonial medicine system, while at the same time promoting an African internationalist understanding of science and healthcare, so that I make sure that Africans are. I know that we've gone over, so but if someone wants to say something very briefly, we can. Let's try to keep it to a couple minutes, and then we'll wrap up we'll wrap up by 8:10. All right, cool. So if nobody, did you want to say something, Kumba, or are you okay with us wrapping up?
I'm okay.
Okay. All right, everybody. Let's move to the final segment. I mean, like I said, I don't know. I go for like 3 hours. I mean, you know, like if this is the old days, after this we go over to the Ethiopian spot and do another 2-3 hours. I'll be getting all sorts of faking like I don't see the text messages on.
Don't I wish?
So yeah, but I don't want to do that. You know, I want to respect everybody's time and stuff like that. So let's move to the call for resources, call for membership, and then adjournment. So we talked about being self-determined. We talked about the resources. Impedum as an organization doesn't take a single dime from anyone except for donations of the African working class and people aligned with the struggle of the African working class. So if there's anybody here that's interested in donating, you can go to Impedum. I mean, you can click on that link right there and it takes you to the donations link as low as $5. So if there's anybody that's willing, you know, let it be known. Anybody interested here in making any sorts of donation? If you're concerned with donating to our efforts, you can in the category you can say like the People's War. So when you donate, just let it be known that it's going to the People's War. All right, so since there's no responses, let's move to the next thing, which is the call for membership. In terms of the call for membership, you know, we can, you know, there's a couple people on the call. Actually, only one person on the call who's not an impeding. So I like to make a call for membership. You know, as low as $10, as much as I don't know, like $1,200, something like that. But I mean, you can click on and become a sustaining member or become an annual member of Impedum and do the work of Impedum where you're at. Is there anyone on the call who is interested in Impedum membership? The other thing is if you're already a member, you can up your membership to a different level. And once again, the thing that really drives us as an organization is the sustaining members. I've upped my level a few times. So it's really sort of, so if you are able to sort of think about moving from say annual membership to sustaining membership, that'd be good. Come back to this agenda and you can click on that. Or you can go to impedum.org.
For the folks who are viewing live, I'm sorry, I was just going to ask you that. Okay, good. For the folks who are viewing live, where do they go?
So go to impedum, impdum.org, and you can click on memberships. If you want to go directly to donation, you can go to impedum.org /donate. But that's how you can go. Also go to Impedum and check out our blog. We have a blog of articles. Some of the articles actually make it to the Burning Spear. Go and check out some of our articles. I've authored 2 articles that are on there. One that you'll find pretty interesting is African Internationalist analysis of the video game industry. And then the next one is the presentation of a virtual curriculum that we have created here in San Diego for children being homeschooled. It's called Uhuru Shule, which means Freedom School, and it's our virtual freedom school that we've created for people who have been sent home. And we know Some kids have been home for at least 3 weeks now, with little to no instruction. Uhuru Shule is a self-determined response to the people's war against COVID-19.
Mhm.
So go on and check that out, everybody. And like I said, you can read that article and you get a link to Uhuru Shule in that article at the bottom of the article as well. So that's under the blog section of, or actually, sorry, it's the news section. It will take you to the Impedum blog. All right, everybody. Kumba, are you willing to adjourn the meeting for us?
Yeah, I can adjourn the meeting. Is there a particular way you want me to go with this?
No. You know how we do it. Just give us a very brief reflection on the meeting, and then say meeting adjourned.
Okay, no, this was a very powerful spirit study. We're trying to do something in the Midwest in this regards, and we always want to do something. But I like the way that this one was broken down, and it came with a historical perspective, and it worked its way on up to the current and the realities of what we're doing today as an organization with the various institutions. So I thought that was very good. And I think that the representation that we had of the comrades from different cities, I'm not sure where everyone is from. Could we get just a quick shout out to, again, where everyone is living right about now? I know where some people are, but where is everybody living? I'm in St. Louis.
California, San Diego.
San Diego.
Yeah, San Diego.
San Diego.
San Diego.
San Diego, yeah.
I'm in Ohio.
Seattle.
Okay, most of West. Okay, very good, very good.
So we got Los Angeles, Seattle, San Diego, Ohio, St. Louis, all on the call.
Yeah. So I'm just encouraged, comrades, and I think we need to keep up this work and move forward with it. And just one note, even if you are a member of Impedum, and that's a great thing, also look at the future in terms of amping up your organizational level and join the African People's Socialist Parties out there waiting for you as well. Think about that.
Uhuru.
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 All right, Vanguard up. East Way
Vanguard up.
two.
E-Africa.
Yeah.
Africa.
East Village 2.
Uhuru, Vanguard out.
Uhuru.
Huru.
Uhuru.